Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Today we're going to talk about Aidan O'Connell. He's stepping in for the Raiders. Spencer Rattler, same thing for him, starting QB. He's had a controversial past for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're expecting to have A.J. Brown and Devonta back, but they've got bigger issues than that. Chris Paul is such a great mentor, so we're going to move over to the basketball end of things. And then we're going to end it by talking about the annual NBA GM survey. Thank you for tuning in. It's going to be a fun episode. This is State of the Association
podcast
today. We're talking about some football, and eventually we're going to transition to basketball. But to start off here, Derek Carr is expected to miss a couple of weeks, and in his place will likely be Spencer Rattler. And we're going to see what he can finally do on the NFL level. Now, as someone who plans on attending the University of Oklahoma, I have kept up with Rattler's college career from, when he started over in Norman to now. And we didn't really see it out South Carolina. In terms of production, it was just kind of middling over there. It wasn't particularly bad. He wasn't throwing too many picks in terms of touchdown to INT ratio. But we didn't really see what he was fully capable of in the offense. They didn't really let him air it out too much. He was just kind of conservative over in South Carolina. But before that, at the University of Oklahoma, what we saw in the Sooners offense, and that's an offense that, especially at the time, was very, very pass-oriented. We saw that in an offense that relies on the pass. Spencer Rattler can absolutely perform. And eventually he got benched. Part of that was because he was throwing a little too many picks and the turnovers was costing us games. But another part of that was just the fact that we had the prospect of Caleb Williams. He had a chance to come in. So just Caleb Williams being a very highly touted recruit, it's reasonable that we would want him in over a guy who's not necessarily the highest ceiling prospect compared to him in Spencer Rattler. And another part of that was just kind of Rattler's attitude. People around campus didn't like him. And then on the show on Netflix, I believe it was QB1 Beyond the Lights, we kind of saw Spencer Rattler in high school. And he didn't treat his teammates very well, right? And especially at the quarterback position, that's really just not really acceptable in what you want from a guy that's supposed to lead your team. But he's grown a lot since then. It's been a while since he's been in high school. So I should believe that Spencer Rattler has had the opportunity to kind of grow and mature and be a better leader by now. And if he hasn't, that's on him. And he doesn't want to improve. And if he has not improved by this point, that's just kind of career sabotage. Because as a quarterback, especially in the NFL, you have to be a good leader. You have to be a good teammate. And so if he's not that, then that is 100% on him. But in terms of the on-the-field play and improved maturity, hopefully, what we see from Spencer Rattler when he comes in these next couple weeks for Derek Carr, I think he can be very, very solid for them. The Saints, they got off to a really good start to the year. They scored 40 points in both their first two games, and then they've really fallen off since then. But I think Rattler can definitely keep them in contention. Do I think he's going to win you more games than a guy like Derek Carr would? No. At this point, I think you probably should stick with Derek Carr, but I think Rattler is going to be a serviceable QB for them. Think of it like another quarterback that we're going to be seeing starting this coming week is Aidan O'Connell for the Las Vegas Raiders. And this is a different case because it's not Gardner Minshew being injured. It's just the fact of they decided it was time for a quarterback change, and Gardner Minshew's stepping down, and it's Aidan O'Connell time over in Vegas. A while back, I was kind of staunchly supporting Gardner Minshew, but at this point in the year, now he has thrown 4 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. So now you're at the tipping point where now you're throwing more picks than touchdowns, and that's just a complete negative because a guy like, Daniel Jones, seasons past, he might throw double-digit picks and not a ton of touchdowns, but at the very least, he's putting more TDs on the board than he is interceptions. Sam Darnold, I think, is a really good example of that with the Jets because, we can see that Zach Wilson and his tenure with the Jets, that Zach Wilson was a worse Jets QB than Sam Darnold, and both of them were bad. But, hey, at least Sam Darnold's throwing more touchdowns than picks, right? But now Gardner Minshew's hit that tipping point, and it's turned over for him, and I hate to see that. Because last year I thought he was really solid for the Colts, and I think he can be a solid conservative game manager. But he just wasn't able to do that for the Las Vegas Raiders. And now, also with the Raiders, Devonta Adams wants out. And you've got to think that's just because he's tired of the quarterback situation at this point. He went over there to play with his buddy, and now his buddy is nowhere to be found. And so for Adams, he just had to deal with middling quarterback play all this time. So to move on from Gardner Minshew to bench Minshew for Aidan O'Connell, I think that decision is also to try to persuade him to say, hey, Aidan O'Connell, he's going to give you that ball more. Just trust us, Devonta. Do I think it's going to work out? No. But I understand it from that perspective, and I believe that is one reason that they're making this move. And for Aidan O'Connell, he was pretty all right last year, 12 touchdowns to 7 picks. And do I think it's a high ceiling? No. My argument for having Gardner Minshew over him was the fact that both these guys don't really have super high ceilings, but I think that Gardner Minshew is going to be able to get you more of what you need at this point. But from what we've seen this season, Gardner Minshew hasn't really been that. So with Aidan O'Connell coming in, once again, both these guys don't have the high ceilings, but if you're trying to just be competitive and keep Devonta Adams around, keep him happy, you want the quarterback that's producing a little bit more, and that could be Aidan O'Connell. So they're going to give him a chance, and originally I was backing Minshew for sure, and I like Minshew as a quarterback, but I understand the decision. The Philadelphia Eagles, they are expecting A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith to be readying up and available to play. Now, the Eagles are in a really interesting situation, and I think it just comes down to the culture of the team right now, and that boils down to your head coach, really. For the Eagles, there's just a lack of leadership, there's a lack of accountability, and there's a lack of discipline is their main issue. Having A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith out last week, yes, that hurts, but I think ultimately having them back obviously is going to help. Hurts going to have some better wide receivers for the ball too. But for the Eagles, I don't think this having them back is going to make them – it's not going to instantly solve all the problems that they have, because there are a lot of problems with this team right now. And it's not going to be fixed just with the addition of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Hurts going to look better, no doubt. But are the Eagles going to be able to translate this to a postseason run, making it back to that elusive Super Bowl? I don't believe so. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done for them. Now, obviously, it's going to be great to see A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith back out there. I have no doubt about that. Hurts has not made the best decisions so far this season. And last week, without both those guys, he completed just 60% of his passes for 180 yards. No picks, but just one touchdown. And it's not what we're used to seeing from Hurts. Now, is he the best aerial threat at QB in the league? No. But he's certainly better than that. And, just for Hurts, I think the decision-making, that's not going to be that much better with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. So he's got to work on himself right now. And for the Eagles, it's not an instant fix whatsoever. They've got a lot that needs to be done. This team consistently collapses in the fourth quarter especially. And we saw with the Falcons game, they could be 3-1 if that didn't happen. And for the Eagles, I'm an Eagles fan, so I can say this, I've watched every single game that they've had so far this season. And really, I just haven't been impressed with what they've done so far, even in the games that they win. So for the Eagles, they're going to love having A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith back. The offense is going to look better. And obviously, Saquon has been so good for them. He's really been the reason they won the 2 games that they have. Their offense is going to look better, but their defense has really been super disappointing. And, just the culture of the team right now, more changes need to be made from, defensive discipline to a culture shift. Head coaching changes, whatever it might be. Philly has a lot of work that needs to be done. And I've said it before, their biggest opponent, their biggest problem, their biggest enemy is themselves. The Philadelphia Eagles are the only people that can hold the Philadelphia Eagles back, and I think that they will. If the NBA side of things, during a preseason game between the Spurs and the OKC Thunder, right before the game, Chris Paul and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander met up. And I just want to kind of use it to highlight the impact of Chris Paul, whether that's, currently as a veteran and, just teaching the young guys, or what he could even do in the future as a coach. I think Chris Paul would be a very good coach, and there's a reason his name is brought up in conversations about players that could be a coach. So these two guys, their paths overlapped in OKC a few years back. And that they had a great 3-guard lineup. It was Chris Paul, SGA, and Dennis Schroeder. And those 3 on the court together, I believe that lineup, along with the other 2 to round out the starting 5, I believe that had the highest net rating in the league. And that was because all 3 of these guys not only were they very, very good offensive players, but they could hold their own on defense as well. And that's especially notable for Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder because they're on the smaller end. They're 6'1", and those guys typically you don't expect to be the best defenders, but they are really good defenders. Dennis Schroeder is a really underrated defender in this league, and Chris Paul has obviously been an elite defender at the point guard position for so long. But just Chris Paul, besides the on the court play, and I love that big three guards they had over there. Chris Paul is just a great floor raiser. He can take a team, and he hasn't won a championship. I can't necessarily say ceiling raiser, but he can take a middling team and turn them into the number one seed in the conference. We saw it with the Phoenix Suns as well. And just the knowledge that he's able to pass on with his veteran presence to a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, that's invaluable, and that is just an intangible. It's a big piece in adding a guy like Chris Paul to your team. At this point in his career, you don't do it because of the player that you're getting. You do it because of what he can do to develop your young guys. So I think he's going to do that for his first this season as well. But, just him meeting with SGA before the game kind of made me want to go over that and talk about how, he's just a really good veteran presence to have at this point in his career, as a super solid, steady point guard who can defend as well. He can teach the young guys a lot. And I think and he has a good future as a coach. I would love to see Chris Paul as a coach, especially, a head coach, kind of helping some middling franchise raise the floor of that like he did back when he was playing. And, I think he could be a championship head coach, even if he never won a ring as a player, just because of the fact that he is able and willing, to share his knowledge of the game. I think Chris Paul has a very bright future as a head coach, and I think he is a super valuable veteran presence, and he's just done wonders for so many guys around the league. Every season, John Schumann goes out and asks the NBA GMs anonymously about 50 questions. 50 questions what we got this time. And shout out to John Schumann, because this is something that's really super interesting. And I love to see, the NBA GM survey every year. But that just came out this year, so we're going to take a look at it, some of the results, and talk about them. So the first question was, which team is going to win the NBA championship this year? The 2025 NBA Finals, and 83% of GMs said the Boston Celtics. Number 2 was the Oklahoma City Thunder at 13%. And, I think that makes a lot of sense. The Celtics, they're a very talented roster. They're led by a top 7-ish player in the league, and they've got another borderline top 15 guy. So they've got a borderline superstar because Tatum, there's a debate always about just kind of him being a superstar or if he's just on the outside looking into that. But borderline superstar, an all-NBA guy, and 3 other all-star caliber guys on the starting 5. So all 5 of them can be all-stars, The Boston Celtics are loaded. It makes sense. And then for Oklahoma City Thunder, they've absolutely jumped the timeline. We saw it last year, right? They're expected, maybe the 6 seed, that's going to be an improvement over the 10 seed. But no, they were tied for 1 in the West with Denver. So shout out to OKC, and I understand why they're second. SGA was the majority's MVP pick at 40%, and Luka Doncic is right behind him at 30%. That makes sense. Those are the 2 guys I think will be competing for it. And I had a little segment a little bit ago about how saying it's a 2-guard race between SGA and Luka. And I think with J-Dub and Chet Holmgren probably taking on a bigger offensive load, I think that Luka could ultimately end up winning it because that could lessen SGA's production. And, the stats, the casuals, and I hate to say that, right, because it's voted on by the media, whatever it might be, but they might see Shai's production drop a little bit. And even if he's playing even better on the defensive end, they might see his production drop a little bit and say, hey, we've seen more from you in the past and you didn't win MVP then, so you shouldn't win MVP now. I think that could be an argument made against Shai. Otherwise, I think he absolutely deserves it. But I do believe it's going to go to Luka Doncic. And the next one was, which NBA player would you want to build your franchise around? And the number one answer, overwhelmingly, was Victor Wembanyama. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Generational prospects. And I hate using the term generational prospect because we see guys all the time now, it seems like they're the most hype prospect since LeBron James or in the NFL, best QB prospect since Andrew Luck. And sometimes, that's just not deserved and they don't pan out. And maybe they aren't even that bad, right? But you put this expectation on them that they're going to be elite, and they're not that, and they're just kind of average, and that's okay. But the expectations were so high that they'll always be looked at as a disappointment. But for Wemby, he's absolutely moved up to the generational prospect moniker so far. Luka Doncic was voted as well as the player that coaches have to make the most adjustments for. That makes a lot of sense. This is a guy that can do mostly anything on offense, and really, how much adjustments can you make? Because what if he just makes a shot anyways? That's Luka Doncic's game. So shout out to Luka. Terrorizing game plans everywhere. Jalen Williams of OKC was the number one pick to have a breakout season. I could absolutely see that. My pick for MIP was most improved. My pick for MIP was most improved. Yeah, of course it was. My pick for MIP was Cole Anthony. And I'm going to stand by that, but I could absolutely see Jalen Williams having a great third year. I don't know. My thing with him is I just don't know how high the ceiling is because, he has all the physical abilities, super long wingspan, 6'8". But, he averaged 19 last year, and I just don't know how much that's going to improve in offense with SGA and Chet. But I could absolutely see him being a breakout player for sure. Position-wise, the top guy mostly made sense. It was Luka Doncic, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, Giannis, and Jokic, respectively, for their positions at the top. And, that makes sense. But the thing I just want to highlight here is Luka Doncic was on 3 different lists. He was voted on for the best point guard in the NBA, for the best shooting guard, and the best small forward. So we're out here calling Luka a small forward, right? And he just runs the offense so much, I don't know how you can really see that. But, it's just super interesting to see how the NBA over the years has kind of just become so positionless to where we're calling guys like that, 3 different positions. Paul George was voted by 60% of GMs as the offseason acquisition that's going to make the biggest impact. I agree with that. I think he's going to be huge for Philadelphia this year, especially if he gets to be a third option and just kind of locking on the defensive end, be a really supportive player on that team. And that would be great, in my opinion, because you don't want to ask him to do too much at this point in his career, whether it's from injuries or just playoff woes he's had recently. I think he can absolutely be huge for Philadelphia, and I think he will be. Most underrated acquisition was considered to be Alex Caruso. I'm okay with that. I think Alex Caruso is really, really good, and not a ton of people talked about it when he went to OKC. But, I think he's just perfect for the culture there. He's up there in age compared to some of the OKC roster, but he's a great perimeter defender. He can help Case and Wallace out on that end for sure. I think he can help with his development a lot. And Alex Caruso, I think just having him on the roster, that's going to be able to improve your playoff chances a lot because this is a guy that should just go at the opposing team's best player as long as they're not too big, Memphis was voted to be the most improved team this upcoming year at 67%. I agree with that. They just dealt with so many injuries last year and Ja being out. And yeah, I think they will absolutely be improved. It's a major, major disappointment if they're not a playoff team. And, when they had Ja, they were the 2 seed for back-to-back years at one point. So if they're not a high seed, I don't know if that would be disappointing at this point just because the West is so loaded. But they should absolutely make the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're a high seed. Most surprising move of the offseason was considered to be Cat to New York. And, I think this just kind of shows how shocking the move was. I think both the New York and Minnesota fan bases were surprised, obviously. But GMs around the league considered it surprising, too. So, it just kind of shows that anything can happen in the NBA. Reed Shepherd is the most kind of highly touted rookie, according to the GMs, because he was voted not just to win Rookie of the Year, but to be the best in 5 years. And I think over in Houston, he's going to have a lot of opportunities for development, so I can absolutely see that. Shout out to Reed Shepherd. Best defensive player in the NBA was voted at 40% to be Victor Wembanyama. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just the things he can do, you got to change your whole offensive game plan for a guy like Wemby. But I think it's surprising that Rudy Gobert, he's tied for second with guys like Bam. But Rudy Gobert was at just 10%, and this is a guy who's won 4 DPOYs, was an anchor of one of the best defenses we've seen in modern history over this last year's Minnesota Timberwolves. But, Rudy's getting up there in age, and he just really doesn't get a lot of respect from, whether it's players or coaches. So I understand why Rudy was so low, even if it's a little bit surprising to me. Best perimeter defender in the NBA was Drew Holiday, then Alex Caruso, then Herb Jones, then Lou Dort. So I think Holiday makes a lot of sense at number one. Marcus Smart got a vote as well, but Holiday was the guy that came in to replace Smart and did even better in that system for the Celtics. So shout out to him. And I think it's very notable that OKC has two of those top perimeter defenders now, in Lou Dort and Alex Caruso. So that's going to be a very, very good defensive team, the OKC Thunder. And they were already last year, but adding Alex Caruso just takes that to another level. Best defensive team in the NBA was voted on at 57% to be the Boston Celtics, with Minnesota coming in 2. I disagree with that. I think, the Celtics have a lot of guys that can defend. Their whole starting five can be really solid defenders. Even if a guy like Tatum, right, he's so focused on the offensive load, sometimes he isn't the best defender, but they can all defend. But Minnesota had a historically good defense last year, led by a 4-time DPOY. I don't understand why they couldn't at least be a little bit higher than 23% for the best defensive team in the NBA. I think that they should be number one. But, the GMs are going to vote how they're going to vote. And there's a reason this is anonymous. And I can understand why you would put the Celtics, but I believe it should be Minnesota. I think, you just got so many guys on that team like Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Rudy. There's just so many. Jaden McDaniels, obviously. They got KD, but the Wolves got Jaden McDaniels. There's just so much defensive talent on that roster, up and down the court, all 5 positions. I think that they should very well be the number one defense in the league once again, but I can see where you would come from for the Celtics. Best head coach was overwhelmingly Eric Spoelstra. And it's a crime that this guy hasn't won a Coach of the Year, because we all know how great he is. Yeah, he's never won the award for best coach in the league. Rick Carlisle was voted as running the best offense in the league, and I understand that. The Patriots had an amazing offense last year, led by Tyrese Halliburton, and he's just such a great playmaker. He can elevate your offense, no doubt, and just run that through him. Yeah, you can say it sounds like an easy decision for the head coach, right? To have a super talented playmaker run your offense, but it takes guts to have it be so, just run through one guy and to, believe in its ability to work. And they made the conference finals last year. So I understand that completely. Rick Carlisle, one of the best offensive coaches in the league. They said Chris Paul is going to make the best head coach in the league someday. And I was talking about Chris Paul earlier on the pod, and I absolutely agree with that. I think he's going to be a great head coach, just a great mind for the game. Denver was voted as having the best home court advantage. That makes a lot of sense. Mile High City teams aren't, conditioned to that. So I can absolutely see why they would have the best home court advantage. OKC was at 2. That's notable to me because that is a small market team, right? But, they've got fans that are super passionate about the sport. So shout out to OKC at 2 for being a small market team, holding it down for home court advantage. OKC was also voted as having the best young core at 60%, with the Houston Rockets at 2 at 20%. Steph Curry was voted as the best leader in the NBA at 33%. Last year was LeBron at 27%. I think that's reasonable. Just to see the development from certain guys, and also just how Steph's going to have to take on a new role as a veteran leader with the loss of Clay. He's going to have to do even more on that end, and I can see absolutely Steph being one of the best leaders in the NBA. Best basketball IQ was overwhelmingly Jokic and LeBron. Jokic had over 50%. LeBron was on 30% of the time. So 10 coaches said LeBron, and even more said Jokic. It was those guys, and that makes a lot of sense. Jokic is one of the best passers we've ever seen, especially for a big man. And same thing with LeBron. And LeBron's been around the game for so long. He's got an unmatched mind for it. He's always going to make the right decision, especially in clutch time. And sometimes that's to his detriment, right? Sometimes he's got to go get a bucket and he passes out, and Kyle Kuzma misses a wide open 3. But great IQ for the game. Always makes the right choice, even if it doesn't always work out well. It's not because it's the wrong decision. And the last question that I want to talk about today is going over rule changes and what most needs to change. And that was kind of talking about roster construction, how the new apron makes things more difficult. And you see that already with teams losing people like Cat. It was with that new restrictions that they had to do that. Minnesota did, because Julius is a lot cheaper, right? And Dante DiVincenzo, you can argue that's for the basketball element, but really we kind of know it's financially they want to get Cat off that huge contract. They want to get that off their team. So I just think those NBA GM surveys are always super interesting. Shout out to John for pulling them out in today's episode. Thank you for listening. We're seeing Baseline tomorrow at the OKC Thunder game. Preseason over in Tulsa. Thank you for tuning in. It's been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.